Okay. Yeah? Okay, great. All right, we're ready to welcome our next speakers for our next the lightning talks of this aspiration, stigma, and beliefs session. So these are going to be some short 10-minute talks. Presenting some really great research. So our first speaker for the lightning round is going to be Alaka Hala, who is the program manager for the Strategic Impact Evaluation Fund at the World Bank.
This is joint work with Gabby Farfan at the World Bank and Reno Savakis. We are all three economists, but for this study we have tried to incorporate insights from social psychology, and we hope we've done it correctly. And so something that's consistent across both the economics and psychology literatures is that teachers matter for students, and their expectations for students matter. So teachers in value-added studies kind of determine students' performance on high stakes achievement, and that they're also high value added for their non-cognitive skills as well. You'll also see in studies that were able to kind of equate students on their test scores, either on a blinded exam or on some kind of exam where names were changed. You see that teachers assign lower grades to students who come from socially marginalized backgrounds. And at the same time, you see that teachers' expectations and their biases matter not just for contemporaneous achievement, but also for long-term achievement. So whether kids transition into tertiary schooling, and whether they aim for kind of more advanced classes. And so we started this work when, at the time, the government in Peru was interested in teacher attitudes. We were also, I actually worked on the WDR that Travis mentioned on mind, behavior, and society, and we had come across these lab experiments with weird samples. Right? So one of those was this Darley and Gross experiment that looked at the biases against kind of poor children versus middle-class children in a lab experiment with university students. Right? And so we were very interested in taking this to see whether teachers, real teachers, also exhibit the same biases against poor students, and we wanted to see whether real teachers exhibited these biases. So we went to 100 public schools in metropolitan Lima, and we targeted teachers who are teaching in grades 3 through 5. And the basic setup of this is we're going to have teachers watch a video of a student, a fake student. His name's Diego. He's 9 years old. He's really, really cute. And we're going to ask them to assess his aptitude and behavior after seeing this video. So this is the basic video. They see an intro video introducing Diego. This is Diego. He's 9 years old. He likes to play with his friends. He likes to spend time with his mom and dad. This is what his mom and dad do for a living. Okay, then that's a really quick video, right? Just enough to say that. And then they're going to watch a video of Diego being assessed by a teacher in an oral exam. And she's going to assess him on reading, math, and science. And after watching this video, so that's a teacher in a video, we're going to ask real teachers to assess Diego. We're going to ask them to assess his scholastic aptitude and to judge his behavior. And so now to introduce the experimental part of this intro video, we're going to have two different variants. We're going to have one variant in which Diego is poor, and we're going to have one video in which Diego comes from middle class. Okay, and this corresponds to Estrado D and Estrado C, the second and third income quintiles of consumption distribution. We're also going to have two variants of the performance video, like the quiz video that we do. One is a version where Diego is kind of acting like a normal kid. He's getting 50% of the questions incorrect. He's fidgeting sometimes. He's losing focus. And another in which he's kind of a very high-performing student. He's getting them all right, and he's very focused. And we're going to try to use this to kind of look at kind of theories of discrimination. So in economics, people distinguish between taste-based animus and statistical statistical discrimination, with the idea that if you give clearer signals, it's much better, it's much easier for people not to discriminate, right? And whereas in social psychology, just that updating itself is a choice, even if it's a subconscious choice, and that you might not see this kind of removal of bias once you give people clearer information. And the next, the assessment is going to give us our data. And so just to show you how we cued Diego's social class, this is his neighborhood on the left is when he's in the second income quintile, and the picture on the right is when he's in more middle class background. And this is the video, this is kind of a snippet from when the teacher's quizzing Diego. And first we validate our cues, right? So we want to make sure that teachers, we took a sample of teachers who did not see the intro video, and we want to see if they think that the high-performing Diego is indeed high-performing and is behaving better, and that's exactly what you see. And we wanted to also check if this kind of, our income cues were actually also kind of, teachers were picking up that these are indeed kids coming from different income classes, and I was surprised how salient and two adjacent income quintiles could be. Indeed, the teachers kind of correctly pinpointed the middle class Diego as middle class and the poor Diego as poor. And now for our results. So this was a simple experiment, so we're just regressing indicators for how teachers assessed Diego on his scholastic aptitude or on his behavior for an indicator for having seen the poor introductory video. And I'm going to first show you what we get when we have Diego being kind of inconsistently performing. So we see that teachers are 13 percentage points less likely to have him be performing at grade level when the introductory video shows his background as poor. This is not coming from the fact that they think he's above grade level. This is all coming from the fact that they are 14 percentage points more likely to think he's below grade level. Before we did this, before we did the questionnaire, but after we made the videos, we were afraid that we had primed teachers to think about his grade being kind of his actual grade, because we said his age. So we also asked if he needed additional support or advanced placement. And consistent with these results, they all think he needs additional support, not all, but an equal amount thinks he needs additional support when he's poor, and they don't think he needs advanced placement. We also asked, what level of education do you expect this child to receive once he's an adult? And they are like around 20 percentage points less likely to think that he's going to start college when they've seen this poor introductory video. Now when we look at our behavioral variables, we also asked them to do a behavioral assessment. We see, other than for this category called cognitive ability, we don't see statistical differences between the rich and the poor Diego when teachers are making assessments of his behavior. And now when we look at high performance, when we see the coefficient on the having seen the poor introductory video, we see a different pattern. So we see they're less likely to be thinking that he's performing at grade level. And this is all coming from the fact that they now think he's 15 percentage points above grade level, okay, when he's poor. And consistent with that, he's not below grade level. They still don't think he needs advanced placement, but their expectations for him haven't budged. And if I were an economist, I would just stop here and say, look, this is like evidence of statistical discrimination. They have when I've given teachers a less noisy signal of his performance, they've updated. In fact, they've over-updated, and they now think he's above grade level. But when I look at his behavior, okay, now they've kind of downgraded his behavior. So in the past, when they only thought he had less cognitive ability, now they really think poor Diego is not motivated at all, and he's exhibiting less emotional maturity. And so this, just to conclude, this is evidence that teachers are using socioeconomic status in some way to assess their students. We think this is not entirely consistent with theories of statistical discrimination, because you'd expect this to go away. You wouldn't expect suddenly to shift their kind of negative impression of Diego onto his behavior. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. We have time for one question, if anybody has one. Okay, you can also save it for the panel Q&A discussion.